So Peter was one of the, most faithful disciples, one of the earliest, the rocks of the church. Passionate. And the story that you offer is the one at the end of John's gospel. Tell us what's going on in that story, if you don't mind, and kind of why do you feel like that's an important story for us to think about as we're thinking about living sent?
Yeah, I love this story for the realness and the rawness of the example of what Peter brings. Passionate Peter, he messed up. The Lord spoke it over him that he was going to deny him, and at a charcoal fire on a night that was hard, he did. He lost his centering, and I think that's so human of Peter, which reminds me that it's so human for us at times when we, when our humanness and our brokenness just get in the way of living this faithful life that we're called to live. And so Jesus meets him in that at another charcoal fire. He calls Peter forward. He cooks them breakfast, some loaves of bread and fish, which is also like another story that Peter was a part of with Jesus. And he reaffirms Peter. He restores Peter. He gives him a new mission, which I think is so compassionate of Jesus and empathetic to recognize that Peter needed he needed reconciliation before he could probably go and serve and do and live out his calling, because who he thought he was after he failed was, I think, defining him, which so often is part of us too. We feel like we are defined by our worst mistakes and our fears and our failures. But Jesus brings a different framework. He comes in, he sits over breakfast, over a meal with his friends, and he invites him 3 different times to carry out the mission that he was inviting Peter to do. And so he says, he tells Peter he asks if he loves him 3 different times, and Peter's like, yes, of course I love you. And then he says, feed my sheep. Go feed my sheep. And so Peter's failure did not disqualify him from living a sent life. And I think that's very important for you and for me and for all of us, that our worst failures, our worst mistakes, they're not the defining feature of who we are. That what God says over us, you are beloved, that you are loved, that you are mine, that should be the grounding feature of our story of who we are. But then we're also not meant to stop there. We're also meant to go. And so Peter's story just matters because we often are in Peter's shoes. We often make some of those same mistakes. And the Lord still sends us, calls us to go.
I really appreciate that this week is grounded in some of the stories after Jesus dies and is raised in the Gospel of John. And those stories, if you've never read them, it's worth going back and looking at John chapter 20 and John chapter 21. The church is born out of the experience of resurrection power and resurrection hope, that the worst thing is not the last thing, that death doesn't define our story. It doesn't get the last word. Sin, evil, injustice, none of those things get the last word, that the last word is God's. And then God sends us out